Welcome to another episode of You Know Me, a Golden Isles podcast. How's it going, Buddha?
I'm doing good, Beard.
Thanks. Yeah, it's another podcast, another day. I'm excited about this one. How about you?
I'm excited about it because this is why we do this podcast.
Yes.
And I love learning about things, I love history. And what better historian do we have with us today?
Yeah, I enjoy talking to people and their experience in the Golden Isles, growing up in the Golden Isles. Because, as you know, we're both not from the Golden Isles, and I just love knowing more about the history of the Golden Isles.
You're from Long Island.
I am from Long Island.
I'm from just outside of Boston.
Yeah.
And there's two guys doing this great podcast about everything that's awesome about St. Simon's and Brunswick and Jekyll. And so
why we fell in love with the area.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we have two wonderful guests with us today, and we're going to learn what it was like living here, some of the history of the area, and hopefully some really fun stories about growing up in this area.
Yes.
So two lovely ladies. Miss Jackie, why don't you start? Introduce yourself.
I'm Jackie Brand. I grew up in Brunswick, Georgia. Well, actually, I was born in the old hospital that was down on Egmont Street, I think, a long time ago. And we actually lived on Blythe Island. It's across what used to be the old Turtle River Bridge, but now it's the new Turtle River Bridge, and it's 17. My mother and my daddy had 4 girls, and I was the last. And my daddy cried when I was born because he wanted a boy, and he didn't get one. But I live at Heritage Oaks, and I've never done this before, so we gonna have fun, okay?
I'm Margaret McInnes Butler, and my parents were in Anchorage, Alaska. My dad was in the Air Force. He was in World War II. He was a pilot. And his family lived in Brunswick, Georgia, his mother and his dad. And they owned 2 little bitty motels. One was McInnes Motor Court, and one was a Sea Spray. Well, his dad was only 52, and he dropped dead of a heart attack. Oh. And so I was like 2 months old in Anchorage, Alaska, at Elmendorf Air Force Base. My dad came back to help my grandmother run the 2 little motels on 17. And we were there for about 4 years, living behind the Sea Spray in a little tiny apartment. And I remember going in the restaurant there was a little door from the apartment, and I would sit down while they were cooking and eat breakfast. Well, about 4 or 5 years later, he built a house on Wildwood Drive in Brunswick, and he started McInnes Electric Company. And everything was in the garage, all his tools, equipment, and he had 2 or 3 people working there. Long story short, the company moved and they started doing several bigger jobs. And he branched out, and then my husband, when he graduated from college, he took over the business, and now my son has the business.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So I've been here, I guess, since I was 2 months old.
Amazing. Wow. So start, Miss Jackie. What are some of your fondest memories of growing up in Brunswick?
My daddy died in 1936 or 37, I'm not really sure. And I was 6 years old. I guess if I was born in 31, he must have died in 30. He died in December of 37. And 2 years later, my mother, with the 4 children, well, before that, though, let me tell you, I don't remember a lot about Blythe Island, but I have heard my mother talk about she and my daddy going in Turtle River and the marsh and picking up oysters. And they would scald the oysters in the kitchen on Blythe Island, and my daddy would walk to Arco and on further into Brunswick to sell the opened oysters at 25 cents a quart. My daddy worked at what was then Atlantic Refining Company. It's where the new jail complex is now, out right there next to it where those big tanks are. That's where Arco, Georgia got the name, from the Atlantic Refining Company. And I'm not sure this is a fond memory, but I can remember sitting in my mother's lap in the kitchen on Blythe Island when hobos would come to our back door, and my mother would see them coming, and she would just sit me in her lap and put her finger to her lips and say, "Be real quiet, shh, don't say a word." And the hobos would come up on the back porch, and they would come to the back door, and my mother wouldn't open the door. When my daddy was home, he would. My daddy would give them food, but not my mother. At that time, we rode school bus to school, and Turtle River Bridge was a drawbridge, and sometimes we would have to stop when the bridge was open. And I can remember the bus driver's name, even though I was young. His name was Mr. Ratcliffe. And those senior boys would get out of the school bus, and they would walk along the railing of Turtle River Bridge. And he would fuss and tell them to get back in the bus, but it just did no good. They did what they wanted to, but we had a lot of good memories. There was what we called swimming hole between our house and Turtle River, and that's where we would go swimming. It was just off the side of 17, and there, you might as well say, in the marsh. And that's where the bigger ones would swim, and I could just go down there with them, and we had fun. We would have picnics at, I can't remember, Island Grove is the name of the place. I'm not even sure it's there now, but it was just, you might as well say, still on Blythe Island, towards Waverly, that way. And we would have picnics, and people would go fishing, and we would have fish fries and eat outside. And I can remember my mother and my daddy, and this is not, I guess, good English, but it was killing hogs. And they would, they had a big black wash pot in the backyard, and they would kill a hog, and they would scald it in that big black wash pot. And we would have neighbors would come to help. And they would bring their children, and we as children, even though it was cold, they did that in cold weather. We could play there in the yard with each other, and we would have what we called playhouses in the dirt actually, and we would just use broken pieces of glass to separate the rooms in our playhouse. And sometimes we might get into a little fuss about whose was the prettiest, or whose was the biggest, or who was going to be the daddy, or who was going to be the mama in the playhouse. And then when I was in the third grade, we moved to town. My mother bought an old house on Ellis Street across from Orange Park. And at that time, she worked. My mother did a lot of things. She would sit at night with people that were sick. We had a car, and she would sell linens and bedspreads and things out of the trunk of the car, mostly to black people. At that time, we didn't think about segregation. We just, everybody was just okay. And I actually walked from the 2200 block on Ellis Street to Sidney Lanier School, which at that time was behind Glen Academy, to school. My sisters were older, and they were in junior high and high school, and so we all walked together. My older sister graduated from high school when she was 16 because she started when she was 3. At that time, schools were different, and like I say, my daddy had died in 37, and she was 16 the next May, so she was almost ready to graduate from high school when he died. And so she got a job. She went to Perry Business School. She got a job working at the telephone company, which was there on the street behind Newcastle. I'm not sure now what the name of that street is.
Bay Street.
But it was the telephone. She went to Perry Business School and got a job at the telephone company. And we all worked. But then in the 4th grade, 5th grade, I went to school at then what was called Purvis School, and it's not even there now. It was on Norwich Street, and there's a big, I think it's an auto parts store or some kind of store, Family Dollar maybe. Mm-hmm. And but I went to 4th and 5th grade there, and naturally it was just around the corner, and there was a newsstand. Not many newsstands now, but there was a newsstand across the street, and a lady named Miss Williamson that had 2 daughters ran that place. The Crandall Hardware Store was on the corner, next to the corner, and then there was a service station. My mother, like I say, she bought an old house, and we had a big heater in the living room, and at that time you could have chickens or whatever, and my mother had chickens in the backyard. She also had a peach tree, and sometimes we might have to go and break a limb off the peach tree. And if it wasn't big enough for what she was going to use it for, because we had not been very good, she'd make us go back and get a bigger limb.
Oh, no.
And she would, in the wintertime, she would raise what we called, I guess they still call them that, biddies, baby chickens. And she, from somewhere, would come up with a big box about the size of a refrigerator box, maybe, and she'd put it behind the heater in the living room in the winter and put a light bulb in there at night when we let the heater go up, the fire in the heater go out, to keep those biddies warm. And eventually, my mother was not an educated person, but she was a good Christian woman, a proud woman. We never went on welfare. My daddy died and left her no insurance, but she managed by doing different work for people. She worked in Hercules. At that time, it was called Hercules Powder Company. I think eventually they might have dropped the name Powder. I'm not sure, but it was just Hercules. But she didn't work there long because she just couldn't do it. She sat with people. She sold the stuff. She worked in, no, she did not work in the shipyard. But my mother, I might be skipped a lot of time, I'm not sure, because
It's okay.
my son said that I get time and days mixed up, and I do.
So do I.
And, but anyway, they built the J.A. Jones shipyard down there in what we always call the other end of town. Now it's called the South End, but at that time it wasn't. And my mother took in boarders. People would come from all over to work in the shipyard because times were hard. There was not much money around. And so they would come to work in the shipyard to make money. My uncle came from Lake City, Florida to work in the shipyard. And she had boarders, and they would, roomers. She didn't actually feed them, I don't think, but they would come, and one would sleep in the bed in the daytime that had worked the night before. And when he left, somebody, when the one that was going to work days left, then another one would come in that had worked the night before, and he would use the same bed. They just, I don't know if you call it rotated the bed or what, but anyway, they both used it. And I was thinking this morning, am I talking too much?
No, you're perfect.
We used to have mailboxes on the porch. You don't see that anymore. Everybody has a post now in front of their yard, in front of their house. And the postmen or post ladies drive trucks or jeeps. But at that time, the postman walked. And they would carry a backpack, like a sling on their back with mail in it. And they would walk up on your porch and just put your mail in your mailbox. You didn't have to go out in the rain to the street. And where we lived across the street from Orange Park, it had not been kept up. It had been dug out, I guess, for a swimming pool or something, and there was a lady that worked for the county, and her name was Mary Melnick. You might have heard of Nick Melnick, the golfer. He was eventually an analyst on TV, I think. His mother would come and just sit out there where the place was dug out. It was walls, maybe 2 or 3 feet, maybe a couple of feet high. And she'd just sit there on those walls. And there were tennis courts, but nobody played tennis. There was a wrought iron fence around the park. Now I haven't been by, but they call it Orange Square. At that time it was Orange Park. Nobody used the park. It was just there. It had a nice path through it. You could cut through the park kind of diagonally and walk from the corner of L Street and Ellis Street over to the corner of Reynolds Street, and that saved you a little bit of time. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, times have changed. When I graduated from high school in 1949. My sister was just, I think, about 4 years older than I was. And she was working downtown in what was the Guarantee Shop at that time, on the corner of Newcastle and Gloucester Street. I think there's a bank there now, but there was a clothing store, and the name of it was A.J. Gordon. You remember that, Margaret?
I do.
And there were a lot of, at that time, Portuguese people in Brunswick. And I can remember they had a sign in the window. You remember that little sign that said, "Si habla," something meant that they spoke whatever language, Spanish, I guess. But 3 doors down from that, there was Cunningham Jewelry was there. It's not on the corner. It was not on the corner at that time. And then there was a dress shop named Guarantee Shop, and my sister worked there. And then where Georgia Power is now, I don't remember what was there, but that was next to the park.
That bank.
No, the bank was on this side.
St. Mark's is here, and then the bank was Whitlock.
On Newcastle.
Maybe that was earlier.
On Newcastle.
Gloucester.
No, I'm talking about Newcastle.
Okay.
Yeah.
South Coast Bank.
Y'all can edit this out.
And Altman's. Remember Altman's?
Altman.
Salkin's shoe store.
I know what was there where George Power is now.
Peter's.
My friend just reminded me. There was, no, I'm wrong, that was in the other block. Anyway, something was there, and then there was a park, and then there was a pool hall there. A man named Sonny Hall run the pool hall between the park and the Ritz Theater. And the Ritz Theater was right there where it is now. Across the street, there were several places there. There was a clothing store named G.W. Owens or George Owens men's store. Well, I think it might have been called Men's Hats, but they sold suits and everything. And several stores, and then the park. And then First National Bank was next to the park, and then Crescent. And we called it Crescent. Now it's called Crest. You remember us calling it Crescent? Yep. And when I was 14 years old, I told a story and got a job working at Crescent during Christmas. And on Saturday afternoon, now, my friend that's here with me grew up on St. Simon's, but I grew up in Brunswick, and I don't know what they did on St. Simon's.
No, Jackie. I grew up in Brunswick until our roof came off during the hurricane door. And then we moved to St. Simon's.
But
So I was on St. Simon's from 2 months old to 12 years old
in Brunswick.
in Brunswick on Wildwood Drive. I walked to school every day. The Goodyear School Elementary.
Is it still where it is? The Goodyear?
Yes.
It's still same.
And that's where my grandfather's motel was, right across the street on 17 from Goodyear School.
And that's the one that's still there, right?
They tore it down.
Oh, okay.
It was called Mackinnis Motor Court,
Okay.
and it had 23 little units. I have a postcard, and I have pictures, and Hercules was right in the back. You can see the smokestack going up. And everything it was like a 2-lane. Highway 17 was just 2 lanes. And Goodyear School was across the street from, you remember Howard Johnson's? Jackie, you remember Howard Johnson's? Well, that was there. And there was Oak Park. There was another motel that was my grandfather's competition. And Goodyear School, it's been there for a long time. I went there from 1st grade to 5th, and then I went to Jane Macon. And then we moved to the island when our roof came off.
Oh, jeez.
And so I ended up transferring to Glen Middle, and then I graduated from Glen Academy in 1970.
Wow.
I was Howard Johnson across the street there where the emergency room and all that is now. And then
Yes.
Shoney's was next to, there was the church there, and then Shoney's
Shoney's was across the street, down further.
on the, but was it on the same side with the school?
Yes, Shoney's was on the same side. And my really good friend, and we're still good friends, Susan Portman's daddy, Bill Portman, he built that Shoney's. And that was the hangout for everybody. I mean,
And great strawberry pie.
yes, great strawberry pie. And to this day, Susan Portman, his daughter, she's one of my best friends. We live in the same neighborhood. But her daddy he worked in the Greyhound bus station. He was a cook.
Wow.
And so he started the Shoney's.
Wow.
And then he built another one right down from the first one. And then he started building them all over. And he did really well. And my sister, who is like 16 months older than me, she married Bill Cody, and his daddy worked at the Greyhound bus station too. And he started a restaurant in downtown Brunswick called Cody's. And they had really, really good food.
Right on the corner where,
Right on the corner.
where Fox Pizza is.
I ate
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Near the library.
Yep.
And that was, and then he branched out. He had like an 8th grade education. And so he started the Cody's, and then he started Western Sizzling Steakhouses, and they ended up on 17. And he had that one, it went really well. So then he opened up a few more, and then he had them all over.
Did not.
Those 2 men were very, very successful.
Wow.
That's wonderful.
I did not know that all started.
Yes,
Here.
here.
I didn't know that.
Wow.
Shoney's, I didn't know it had that much of a history.
Yeah, Shoney's. Mr. Portman was he was just really, really courageous to do that. That was very ambitious. And my dad started that electrical business. It was 1957, I believe. And he started with just in the garage on Wildwood Drive. And the men would come in the mornings and get all their equipment and the wire and everything and take off. And he built a little office there. And he was there for a long time. He did all the maintenance and everything. It was called the pulp mill back then, Georgia Pacific.
Yep.
Yeah, the pulp mill.
Pulp mill.
That's where Georgia Pacific is right now, right? Right off the Turtle River.
Right. And then Hercules, it was going good too. And they did a lot of work at Hercules and the hospital, and they just branched out then.
Keeping in that line, there was King Seafood at the time, right? The shrimp processing.
King and Prince Seafood.
Was it King first and then King and Prince? Or is it always King and Prince?
I'm not sure, but there are two, like CPAC and King and Prince Seafood. Well, the guy that J. Roy Duggan was King and Prince Seafood, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then CPAC, well, this is funny, but two of our really good friends and my next door neighbor, Russ Mintzer, he took over Brubaker's job. And he was head of it for several years. He retired a couple years ago.
Oh, wow.
Russ Mintzer. And then at CPAC, that's one owner.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack Kilgore retired a few years ago. And he was like head of it. He didn't own any of it. I think Mr. Rich was the owner.
Yep. It was Rich's. And then I actually worked at King and Prince for a number of years myself.
You did?
Yes.
Okay, well, you probably, Mackinus Electric did a lot of their maintenance there.
Yes, they did. Still do.
Yes.
I think they have pictures of along the hallways of when they actually processed the shrimp, because it was all local Georgia shrimp that was being harvested. And we still had one woman, she had worked there for 46 years, and she started with cleaning the shrimp, and now she stands at one of the lines and watches the shrimp go by. But there's such a great history about that, and it's right near the shipyard where they built the Liberty ships at the start of World War II. So there's a lot of history here that people don't know about that kind of ties into that. A lot of people didn't know that Brunswick was a place that the Liberty ships one of the places that the Liberty ships came out of after Pearl Harbor. And then here on St. Simons, didn't they do training for the radar operators for the Navy? Right by the beach from the museum, they're saying that they did a lot of the training for those radar techs for the Navy, so they can.
The Navy pick a restaurant.
Yeah.
You know, Glencoe had the big blimps.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, you would see them and you could go visit and take tours. And I think when I was in grade school, we'd go out and look at the blimps. And I mean, that was Glencoe was big.
My husband was stationed at Glencoe. In fact, my mother had 4 daughters, and all of us married sailors from Glencoe. And my mother used to say that she would have had 4 old maids on her hands if there had not been Glencoe. But Susan was talking about Cody's restaurant there on the corner of Newcastle and Gloucester, and Cody started it. Where the library is now, on the corner of Gloucester and Bay Street that runs behind Newcastle. I think that's Bay Street.
Yes, it is.
But that's where the bus station was. Mm-hmm. And it was not where it is now, where the well is. It was there on the corner. And you can see my hands, but if you walked on down towards the river, from where the bus station it was and where the library is now, and on down. Sometimes you could see what we would always call the big ships. They're not nearly as big as all these car carriers and things, ships that you see now.
Oh, yeah.
But ships, they were always gray, as I remember. Now, they probably were not, but I remember them as being gray. And if there was a ship down there, we always called it a big ship, not like they are now. And like Margaret said, there were blimps. My husband was a technician on a blimp. In fact, he was stationed at Glencoe for a long time, not because he wanted to be. He was from Alabama, and I don't know much about it, but he said that every Friday he would go to Captain's Mass and put in to go anywhere the American flag flew. And he never went anywhere. He never even went across the Mason-Dixon line.
Oh, my goodness.
In order to qualify for hazardous duty before he got out, he went up in a blimp, and they flew just a little ways out in the Atlantic Ocean because they had to go at least 3 miles out. I don't know, I can't remember what that's called now, but they had to be 3 miles out for it to be considered hazardous duty.
That's because that's where it becomes international waters.
And so anyway, they did that for him. And when I was just in high school, and my sister was working, we would actually hitchhike to St. Simon's on Sunday afternoon after church. We went to Norwich Baptist Church, and we would walk right around the corner from church, and we would eat lunch, and then we would walk down either to the corner of Norwich and L. And at that time, you were not afraid to get in the car and ride with somebody. You wouldn't do that now. No. But if we didn't get a ride in a few minutes, standing on the corner of Norwich and L, then we would walk on down L Street, closer to Hercules, and it's Glen Avenue now. I guess then, I don't know if it was called Glen Avenue then. I think it was. And we'd stand there at the corner of Glen Avenue, and right there where Goodyear School is now, and hitchhike to St. Simon's. In fact, that's the way I met my husband. Believe it or not, there was a beach on St. Simon's where the pier is. They didn't have all those big rocks. There was grass and things, but and there was a beach, and people would spread out their blankets on the beach, and you could go swimming or whatever. Beach towels were spread out, and people would lay down. And my husband, like I say, was in the Navy at that time. He was not my husband, but there was a really, really big rock up on the grassy part above the beach, and he was sitting on that rock. And my sister said, "There's that red-haired sailor that I think's so cute." Well, she didn't get him, I did. And another thing that was different then is at the YWCA, on Saturday night, we would have a dance. I was a member of what was called the Spinsters Club. Don't hear that word much anymore. Spinster, Spintser, I think. And it was just a group of single young ladies, and we would go to the Y on Saturday night. Different people, different organizations, I guess, I don't know, would sponsor a dance down there. There were always chaperones. But this Saturday night, I was there and my husband came in. And he met me. Or I met him, maybe that's where it should be. And he asked me if he could go to church with me the next day. And I told him yes. And at that time, they had a bus. They would bring sailors on buses from Glencoe to Brunswick to churches on Sunday. Now it's border guard training place, and I don't know if they bring those people or not. But at that time they did, and so he had ridden the bus from Glencoe to Norwich Baptist Church, and he went to church with me that day. And then I went home and the bus picked him up, and that particular Sunday we didn't go to the beach, and my mother had a car and my sister could drive. And so on Sunday afternoon, but before Sunday afternoon, on Saturday, the thing that everybody did was go downtown and park and watch the people. That was the entertainment on Saturday afternoon. And if you could just get a parking place in front of Cresses, you had it made, because everybody went to Cresses. It was, at that time, a 5 and 10 cent store. I don't think they even have those anymore. They sold candy. I always worked behind the candy counter when I worked there. I worked there actually 2 years, like I say, the first year when I was 14, second year when I was 15. And I worked behind the candy counter, and you could stand there and you could buy a nickel's worth of candy or a quarter's worth of candy. You could also buy a quarter's worth of gasoline. And we did that a lot. We would buy a quarter's worth of gasoline or 50 cents worth. We never filled up my mama's car. But we would, on Saturday afternoon, go, if you were not working, you went downtown, you parked in front of Cresses, and you watched the people. And you'd see a lot of people you knew. And people would come up to the car and talk to you. And it was a real good time. And that Sunday afternoon, my sister and I were riding downtown, and you called it making the drag. Believe it or not, there where the empty part is at the end of Newcastle, where they're talking about doing something, and they've always been talking about doing something, right there where Bay and Newcastle run together. There was a depot, a train depot. The train would, I don't know when it all came in, but I know it would leave sometimes about 9 o'clock at night, because as far as I know, it's the only time I ever rode a train. And I got on a train one night, and I got to ride to Atlanta, Georgia, where my next to the oldest sister was stationed with her husband that was in the Army. And I went to the Southeastern World's Fair. And then the Oglethorpe Hotel was there, And it was a big place, and I can remember it had steps in front of it, and it took up the whole block. And it was a beautiful place, and different photographers. I remember Olin Mills Portrait Company would come and set up there in the Oglethorpe Hotel and stay maybe for a week or two, and you made an appointment and you went and you had your picture made. And they would talk you in. You didn't intend to buy but one, but they'd talk you into maybe buying 5 or 6. And that was, then you went on across the street to where the George Owens had the place and the American National Bank and Crescent. And then on across Gloucester was where Cody's restaurant was, and a barber shop and a whiskey store. You remember when that package store was there?
I remember the barber shop, but not the package store.
Oh, yes. The package store was there too, because sometimes you'd see people going in the package store you wouldn't think would ever go in. But especially if you had to park down there on Saturday instead of being lucky enough to get a parking place in front of Crescent's. And then there was a place called, it was a dress shop, and then the American National Bank. And then a park, and then Wilden's Shoe Store. There was a shoe store there named Wilden's Shoe Store, and then some kind of little store, and then Altman's Dress Shop. And Altman's Dress Shop was the place to shop in Brunswick. People that had money shopped at Altman's. And then there was a place called Farley's Shoe Store, and where the frame shop is now, I don't remember what was there. And then there were stores on down in the next block.
Oh, Mr. Henry had Glen Electric, where Tate's Feed and Seed is.
It was across the street. Yeah, the Bijou was on this side, Bijou Theater.
Do you remember Glen Electric, Tate's Feed and Seed, and then Glen Electric was there a long time ago?
Well, did they move across the street?
They were they built that, I think, and then they ended up moving to the other side of town. But I used to go there with my dad, and Mr. Henry was the candy man, and he'd always have candy. And
I remember Tate's Feed and Seed because my mama, it was there, I don't remember. The city drugstore, I think, was on that corner next to Tate's Feed and Seed, and now it's moved across the street. And J.C. Penney was across the street from Altman's, and it was a big store. And I don't know if y'all have ever been to a store that had little things like tracks that ran around the ceiling, and they were electric. And they would put the change, the receipts from each cash register at night, and those little things, and they would go on the train, on that, well, it wasn't a train, but it was little box-like things that would go on this track that was electric, and it would take the money and the receipts up to the office. That store had a balcony. But on the other side of the street, though, was the Bijou Theater. And the Bijou Theater didn't cost quite as much to get into as the Ritz. You remember that? And it didn't have, maybe it had not as well-known films. Maybe, I don't know how to put it. If films are classed like A, B, C, and D, maybe they would have C and D, where the Ritz would have A and B. I don't know that they're classed like that, but that's probably. And not too many people would go to the Bijou. But it was not a bad theater. Eventually, it closed up, but I think they have reopened it now. I'm not sure. Is it still there, though, and just not opened?
Where was it?
It was the park, and then the street, and then the city hall.
Okay.
Okay, it was on next to the park on Castle, going down toward the crest.
Okay. So I'm not sure if that was the 1313.
Yeah. No. I think it's closer to where like Reed's used to be is now. Yeah, 'cause it's near the courthouse. It was closer to the courthouse, right?
Or the old city.
No, city hall.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. So
Newcastle.
1313.
Yeah, I think that's because you got the old
I think
city hall, then you have the street, then you have the square or the park, and then you have that.
I think you're
that
talking
building.
1313.
There's the city hall, and a street, and a park, and then the Bijou.
Yeah.
That's supposed to. Yeah.
That was the old 13th. Supposedly that's haunted. Yeah, by Silver Bluff. Yeah, no, that's I don't know what it is now. It was a couple of different things. I know Sal from Sal's Pizzeria. I think he owned that building for a
He
little.
bought
bit.
that for a little bit because he thought it was haunted. And
Theater?
yeah, he thought it was haunted. And they actually brought in paranormal investigators and things like that.
And Altman's is now the Brunswick Actors Theater.
Yes.
Oh, this is what?
The Brunswick Actors Theater.
The gallery in Soglo across from Tipsy McSway's.
My sister-in-law, Gail Butler, was Gail Moore then. She always was into arts, and she was a dancing teacher too. I took dancing from her at the recreation center, but she's been a director for plays for Island Players.
Yep.
And she's doing one. Linda Gallagher's retiring.
Yes,
Yeah.
she is.
And my sister-in-law, Gail Butler, is in charge of getting the people to sing and for the last act. But back in the day, the recreation department had Sonny Miller, and it had so many good athletes. And Sonny would have a football program, and they had cheerleaders. And Sonny Hillman Rhodes was there, and Tony Spinelli. They were coaching, and I was a cheerleader in I think 7th grade there. And then I went to Glen Middle and I cheered there. But Sonny had really good football teams, and we would sell these tickets and get to go to Hialeah, Florida. And the cheerleaders and the players would come to Brunswick and stay with us. And then we would go to Hialeah and stay with them.
Nice.
And Earl Bagley was a real famous dance teacher from Jacksonville. He was like the June Taylor choreographer in New York, and he would come to Brunswick and teach dancing. And a lot of us took from him. And then Brad's sister, Gail, she had a dance studio there. But I grew up going to St. Mark's in Brunswick. And my dad was on the vestry, and I went to Sunday school there. I went to kindergarten there. And we're members there still. I mean, when we moved to St. Simon's, we were at Christ Church, and then we live over here, but we're members of St. Mark's. And it was the nicest church. In Sunday school, we had a Sunday school teacher named Mr. Torbett, and he was wonderful. But every once in a while, we like to skip and go to the bus station to drink hot chocolate. And the people in my Sunday school class, we still are friends. And Susan Leotis, her daddy, they started a company in downtown Brunswick called Leotis Company.
Mm-hmm.
And they had different items that they
Wholesale
groceries. And they were across the street from where the library is now on the corner.
Wow.
She was one of the victims with me. We were buddies. We would go to the Howard man. He was my BF, my best friend from St. Mark's all the way through school. And still now, we still go to the same church. Howard started off just in charge of the buses for Glen Academy for all the buses. And then he ended up being the superintendent of schools.
Oh, goodness.
Anyway, it's just fun if you go back and look at the people like Mr. Torbett started Concrete Products, I believe was the name of his company. Mary Melnick, Jackie was talking about Mary. Well, she lived behind my grandmother, and there was an alleyway behind there. But I grew up walking to my grandmother's from our street on Wildwood Drive. And my grandmother, when I was like 5 and 6, taught me how to play bridge. So her neighbors, Miss Kilby across the street, Miss Five Ash down the street from us on Wildwood Drive, we would sit, my sister and I and my grandmother, or either Reby or Miss Kilby across the street, we'd play bridge. Well, when the hurricane came, Miss Five Ash lived down the street. Well, she came over to stay with us, and my grandmother came over. And my mother, before it even got bad, my mother said, this is the safest house. And the Torbetts had come up with this roof design, and they had a house in Country Club Park with the same roof and everything. Well, as soon as we got a little bit of wind, there went our roof. Mm-hmm. We had to go down 2 doors down to Miss Five Ash's and spend the night. We never went back to that house.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
And Mary Melnick was a realtor, and she sold the house. And another thing about Mary Melnick, she was the state champion in golf. She was the state champion in tennis.
Wow.
She was a great athlete. That's where Steve got his athletic ability.
Wow. And what hurricane was that again? It was just the hurricane that blew the roof off?
Dora. That was 1964. Wow. So we moved to St. Simons. And so I started going to Glen Middle then, which I'm glad I did, because that's, long story short, my husband was at Glen Academy. Now, he was born in the Brunswick Hospital, and his parents, they were from Darien, Georgia.
Okay.
And his parents had a little tiny store, started out, and they were from Baxley, Georgia. They were farmers. And his dad ended up building the Butler's IGA. And his parents got married real young, and they struggled for a long time, and he worked in a store, and he ended up buying the store and ended up having the Butler's IGA. But my husband was really good in basketball, so the coaches at Glen Academy, when he was in 11th grade, recruited him to go. They said he'd get a scholarship if he went to Glen Academy.
Wow.
So they drove back and forth, but they moved to the island while they were building their house across from Fort King George. And so that's why he went to Glen Academy. But back in the day, St. Simons was so little. When I was 12, we moved there. I could ride my bike to see my friends in Kelvin Grove, not even hardly see a car. It was so unbelievable. Wow. And when I was 15, when I was getting my learner's license, my dad took me to St. Clair. There were 2 houses there. And we would just ride around, and Sea Palms was not there. And then when I got a little older, about 15, Windships had a surf shop. So my dad bought me a surfboard. I had a Greg Knoll surfboard. So I hung out at the beach. All my friends did. We would go to the beach. Our parents would just drop us off. We would stay right in front of King and Prince all day long. They'd pick us up in the afternoons. And we just had a wonderful childhood. It was fun in Brunswick, and it was fun on St. Simons. And in Brunswick, my friends lived on Riverside, and I would have to cross 17 from Wildwood. It was right beside Goodyear School. And so I'd just go over there all the time and see them. And my mother worked at VA, and my dad was starting his business. And so we had a housekeeper. I had Anna and Shirley, and they were like our mothers. They would, take care of us and feed us lunch. But we would just take off on our bikes, and we'd be gone all day, and nobody worried about anybody. I mean, everybody, and if you needed something, one of the other mothers would probably be home. Phyllis Tollison lived across the street, and Thompson's across the street, and we just had a wonderful neighborhood, and everybody just kind of looked out for each other. And my best neighbor was behind us, the Steeds, because she didn't work, and she would take us everywhere and do whatever. And her son, Bill Steed and Barbara Steed, they had an antique shop on the island for years. But we just had a really good childhood. And on St. Simon's, the same thing. It was just, and one time we were at the beach, my girlfriend, Jan Harden, and I had my surfboard, and there was a bunch of black people out there surfing. Not surfing, they were swimming, but they couldn't really swim very good. And they started singing. Well, they came over and said, "Can we use your surfboard?" And I said, "Yeah." It was the Otis Redding show.
Oh,
Wow.
All the good singers, and they had this huge concert on Jekyll. And her aunt and uncle were staying there, and they were up on this balcony. And Jan said, "Don't look at my aunt and uncle." I said, "Okay." So I glanced over, and they were standing up going, like, but we stayed in the water all morning, and they were so much fun, and they sang. It was unbelievable. It was all the good singers.
that was funny. My wife and I were just talking about Otis Redding the other night. We were watching a movie, and they had someone kind of playing Otis Redding singing, and it's like that's one of our favorite like party songs was that Shout. And,
Shout.
Yeah. And we were just talking about that. That's funny. It's awesome.
Well, the whole show was there. And
That's amazing.
afterwards, they came over and they said, "Okay, we're going to have tickets for y'all, and they're going to be at the desk right when you walk in." And we were so happy. We got home, and as soon as we told our parents, they said, "You're not going over to Jekyll." It was terrible. But we had good groups, like the Tams would come, and we'd go to Jekyll and see the Tams. I mean, we had a lot of fun.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're the last of that kind of generation of having those wonderful neighborhoods where everyone was friends.
Right.
Parents looked out for everyone's kids. I kind of grew up very similar. We had a lot of kids in the neighborhood. All the moms were stay at home, and we would play street hockey or street football or ride around on our bikes and you get home, drop off your books, get out your school clothes, get into your play clothes, and out the door.
Exactly. That's what we did.
And as long as we were home by the street lights coming on, everything was fine.
You know, the good thing, though, St. Simon's, my son and his wife, and they have 2 little boys, my grandchildren, Albie and Dean. They are 12 and 14 now, and they get on their bikes, and they live in Rowantree, right behind Oglethorpe Park. They ride their bikes to the pier. They ride to Gould's Inlet. They take their fishing poles, and they fish, and they have so many friends in their neighborhood. They have so much fun, and it's safe. The only thing is the traffic's a little different now.
It is.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So you've seen a lot of change going on here, some for the good, some not so much. Was it for you, did you perceive it as a gradual change, or is it one of these where you just kind of, one day you kind of realize, oh my God, almost like an instant change type of thing, or did you kind of see it as a gradual?
Well, it's gradual for us. When we graduated from college, we lived in Bell Point, right across from Brunswick Country Club. You did too? We lived on Bell Point Parkway.
We lived on King Cotton for a couple of years.
And then we built a house in Sea Palms. That was then 10 years later, my husband and I, we love sports. So he was coaching a Little League team at Mallory Park, and he could barely get home in time to change clothes and get to the park. And I was selling real estate at Parker Kaufman. And I said, I'm going to start looking. So we found a house that we wanted to build. It was a Southern Living idea house or whatever. And so we built a house in the Island Club. And you won't believe this, but we paid $45,000 for our lot. And our best friend was Doug Lane, and he was a great builder. He built a lot of homes on Sea Island. He built the O'Brien's home and both Davis Love's houses, and he was our best friend. He was like the godparents for our children, and we're the godparents for his daughters. And so he built our house, and we never had a single problem with the house. Doug's retired now. I know, he's wonderful. But anyway, it was just, St. Simon's has changed, but in a way it hasn't. And you still run into people that are local. And one of my best friends started a shop in her garage, Diane Bailey. She had Bailey Boys. It was children's clothing. And she started it. She had 2 sons, Chad and Brent, and she would make all their clothes. And she was just so talented. And so her husband bought her some sewing machines, and then it started really taking off. So they bought a place in Baxley, and they hired all the people that were retired from making shirts. They went bankrupt. It was a huge company, but they went under. And so Jim bought the sewing machines, hired the same people that were working. It was, can't remember it was a t-shirt. No, I can't remember. But anyway, she started making shirts, kids' clothes, just real classic, beautiful dresses for Easter and Christmas. And so it got really, really big. And she had like 2 shops at the Mart in Atlanta. And we've been with her a couple of times, but she retired. And now one of her sons, Chad, he and his wife, Rachel, they have it now. But she doesn't like to play golf like I do or work in the yard. So now she started a blouse business, and it's taken off. And I had dinner with her last night. We go out every Friday night. We're just really good friends, and she's about to get even bigger.
Wow.
I mean, it's just, the Bailey Boys, we would go on trips with them out of town. And one time we were in Asheville, and she said, let's just there's a store that buys from me a lot. And I went, they have a whole huge section of Bailey Boys. And we were in Charleston, same thing. She said, let's go check out the store. And they were all the clothes, that she's designed. But that started in her garage.
That's amazing.
It's a lot.
Those are great stories.
Susan, Margaret, you said you could remember when Frederica Road was a dirt road.
No. We lived on the dirt road. We lived on Major Wright Road, and it was a dirt road. And my mother, they'd pick me up for carpool, and she would have on the worst looking bathrobe and her cigarette hanging out of her mouth, and she'd have tape on her bangs, and she would be sweeping the driveway. It was just, and I'll tell you, oh, this is so embarrassing, but it got where nobody even paid any attention. And that was being a sensitive kid, that was mortifying for me. but no, we had a dirt road, and it took forever. They didn't pave it for a long time after that.
Wow.
I can remember when where 17 Norwich, which is now 341, I think, kind of branched off to the left there, and straight on ahead is what is now 341. And right there in the corner, there was kind of like a diagonal right there, kind of pie-shaped lot. And there was, you remember that restaurant that was called the Forks?
Yes.
Yeah.
They had great chocolate pie.
Yeah. There was a restaurant there called Forks. And much further out from that, you were in the woods. There was nothing out there now, the way there is on the way to Jessup. And Sterling, it's all built up. You might go for miles, you wouldn't see a house there. And then there'd be a house. And then it was just a little old 2-lane road. And you were in the woods if you built a house out there. And on Norwich. I guess that's Norwich that went on out. Was it Norwich? It was, well,
Yeah, Norwich goes right into
yeah.
341. Yeah.
They merged right
Yeah.
there where the jail complex is now.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that was Norwich that went on out there. And they were on the forks, and then you veered to the left. You go out there somewhere on 82 and pick blueberries.
Yeah,
I think
that's still there. The blueberry farm on 82, I think is still there.
I think that's the way you go.
I go to Oglesby. I go past, where Gary Lee's is, the barbecue place. Mm-hmm. It's right past there. It's on, I can't remember the name of the street you turn on, but it's Oglesby's farm.
Is that Myers Hill?
Myers Hill Road. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah, I live out there that way.
Have you picked?
No, I haven't. I actually didn't know it was there until someone told me there's a blueberry farm.
They have wonderful blueberries.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And how big did you say it is, Susan? Did you ever tell me how many acres it was?
I don't remember. Well, it's just, I don't know. It's big. I don't know how many acres, but he's doing grapes now. Both. He's got blueberries and grapes.
Doing the muscadine grapes?
Might have to check it
There
out.
also used to be in Brunswick a place down on Bay Street called Lewis Crab Factory. Do you remember anything about Lewis Crab Factory being down there?
Yes.
And a lot of women worked at Lewis Crab Factory, picking crabs.
Right.
Yeah. I had a cousin that worked down there, but I'm not even sure that place is still there now, is it?
No.
I don't think it.
I'm trying to think of what building it might be.
I think now there where the port is, where they built all those buildings and things there, none of that was there. It seemed like most of the Portuguese people that came to Brunswick settled down in that end of town, and they were all fishermen. Mother met my daddy through her brother. My mother met her daddy. I'm going to get this right. Y'all just bear with me. My mother grew up in Camden County. And at that time, you had to ride a boat to Brunswick or come in a little old boat. There were a bunch of Portuguese fishermen down there. And my granddaddy, on my mother's side, was from Minorca. Is that the place, Minorca? And so he was a fisherman, and he actually was friends with my grandmother's brother. And so he would, when my grandmother's brother would go back to Camden County, sometimes my granddaddy would go with him. And that's the way my grandmother and my granddaddy got married, was through him being down in the Portuguese area. It seemed like most of the Portuguese people settled in that end of town, and I'm repeating myself. But, and there was the place, Lewis Crab Factory, and that's where the shrimp boats would come in, and the crab boats, and that's where they built the shipyard. I think that's now where those apartments and things that they were going to build down there, that's where that was. But there is a replica of the Liberty Ship there at Mary Ross Park. There was no farmer's market when I was growing up. There is now, and there has been for a number of years, but times have changed. There was a store there named on Newcastle Street, another 10-cent store like Cress's, and it was named F.W. Woolworth.
Woolworth.
You don't ever hear of a Woolworth store anymore, do you?
I remember Woolworths.
Yeah.
You remember Woolworth?
I think they finally probably went out of business in the 80s.
I actually worked at Woolworth one time too, and they had what they call floor walkers. And, I think it might be kind of like some stores like Belk's and TJ Maxx and places like that have security that walks around the store. At that time, this was probably along the same line, but they were called floor walkers. And they would really keep their eyes on people that acted the least bit suspicious, or maybe they never had seen in the store before, or for whatever reason. They were sort of the managers too, and of course now you can sue for harassment, but back then you could be talked to kind of ugly, whether you worked there or not. You could just be, if you worked there, you could be talked to sometimes ugly. I have seen people, it never happened to me, but I've seen people just get really fussed at on the floor in stores by the management. And I've also seen people just get fired on the spot. And now some places they have to be written up for 3 or 4 times before they can be fired.
Due process.
Times have changed. Halloween, when I was growing up, if your mother had an old sheet, you put that over your head and put holes in it, and it was a ghost, and that was your Halloween costume. Or you might steal some of your mama's lipstick and paint your face up, or maybe put your hat on backwards, or be a scarecrow or something. But there was no such thing as all these expensive hundreds and thousands of dollars of Halloween costumes like there is now. And certainly no big Halloween to-dos, and people just didn't decorate their yards like at Halloween or Christmas or anything like they did now. If you had a Christmas tree with a couple of strings of lights and some they used to have really pretty painted ornaments, though. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as these little tiny lights. When I was growing up, there was no tiny lights. Everybody had big bulbs on their Christmas trees that screwed in. Now they just kind of plug in, I think. There was no such thing as an artificial Christmas tree. I can remember when the aluminum Christmas trees came out. And a lot of people had those aluminum Christmas trees. You remember those, Margaret?
Yes, I wouldn't have one, but
And they would have these lights that would sit on the floor, and they would turn, and they would aim towards that Christmas tree, and aim, and it would just make the different lights, colored lights, project on that aluminum Christmas tree. At Halloween, when I was just 10, 12, 13 years old, I can't remember trick or treat. I can remember Halloween, but I can't remember when I was a child growing up going to anybody's door and having candy passed out to me. That had never started. You might throw a brick on somebody's house porch, or you might throw some dirt up there, but that was it. And you could let your children play out in the streets. We played out in the streets till 9 and 10 o'clock at night in the summer. And, nobody thought anything about it. It was fine. We used to play an old game called Kick the Can. I don't even know if they play Kick the Can anymore.
I don't think I did, but I don't think that's something that's
there. We would kick the can. The young boys then, high school boys, rode bicycles and delivered groceries for grocery stores. High school boys, there was no such thing. You had to be rich if you were a high school boy and had a car. Every high school boy now almost has a car. It's just
changed.
Times have changed. Times have just changed. But people have changed with them too. A lot of people have. I think that there's not as much discrimination or difference now. A person that does not have quite as much money as the next person, those two people can still be friends. People don't look at you now if you have money or if you don't have money. Back then, there was a difference. You could tell a difference. Not that one person was any better than the other person, but people that had money tended to stick together. I'm friends with Margaret. One of us is rich and one of us is poor, and I'm not going to tell you which one, but we're friends. But it didn't used to be that way. It was different.
Jackie.
Oh.
Well, I'm not rich, and quite honestly, St. Simon's is a wonderful place because I go to this line dancing on Wednesday nights
at Ziggy's,
and there's every kind of person, every kind of color, and it doesn't matter, and we all have so much fun.
That's it.
And Donna Bruce is the teacher, and she's wonderful, and she's been doing this for like 30 years. And my friend who's 83, and I'm 73, she taught me into doing it. And so we've been doing it almost a year now, and our goal is just to be able to do one of the dances those younger ones get up and do. It's so hard.
I've heard about the line dancing at Ziggy's. It's
so
a lot of fun,
fun.
yeah.
It's a combination of every kind of person you can imagine.
Wow.
And people come from everywhere because my son married a girl from Jessup, and she got him started going to Ziggy's at night and line dancing, and he lived in Brunswick and she lived in Jessup.
And I go to Shag on Thursday nights too.
They still do Shag?
Yes, we have a Shag club, and that is fun. It's all kinds of really nice people.
That's what Ziggy's started out.
It started as like Shag.
Yeah, it was down by the Benny's Red Barn, wasn't it?
Well, that's the Tree Barn. We went there last Thursday because they have a guy named Tony Adams that's really good, but he's going through a cancer treatment, so he was supposed to be there, but he wasn't. Somebody took his place.
But yeah, Ziggy started out as kind of like a Shag club originally.
Well, it was Keenan and his friend, and they played together, and they were so good. They were called Ziggy's, but that was just their nickname. But they were like at Sea Palms a lot. Now, we'd go over there and listen to them like we were in our 30s, I believe, or 40s. And one time I told him it was this friend of ours' birthday, and he was only like 30, and I told him it's his 40th birthday. And he was so mad at me. But anyway, that was just, they played at Ziggy's too, but they played at Sea Palms. They played at different places. And Keenan Carter, he ended up doing bingo at Sea Island. He was Mr. Bingo. And now they moved to North Carolina, but they were, and his partner died several years ago.
Wow.
But it was really fun when they were anywhere.
I'll bet. Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about Ziggy's and
Yeah.
how long they've been around, and I hear so many stories of people remembering different things about Ziggy's. It's kind of a institution here on the island.
Well, one thing that my sister-in-law did, she taught disco dancing there was a nightclub called Richard's, and it was over there by the drugstore, St. Simon's Drugs. It was but it was really a popular place. Richard Hull owned it, and his wife, Olinda, she does line dancing. Her husband died several years ago. But Richard's was really a neat place, and my sister Gail taught. A lot of people took disco dancing. It was fun.
Well,
But St. Simon's has changed a lot,
Yeah,
but it's still very local. I mean, it's just, there's a lot. If you like to play golf or tennis or go to the beach, there's just, and you'll run into local people, in the grocery store. And the sad thing about it, though, is if you didn't have like a business to go back to, a lot of people did move away.
What about, because you talk about Ziggy's, but what was, looking back, what was one of your favorite places to go eat? If it's still here or maybe it's gone, but what was your favorite place?
We like Gant's Steakhouse. It was very good. It was over where Frederica is now. Bill Gant opened it. And then Crab Trap and Crab Daddy's. Well, my neighbor across the street is Charlie Williams. And Charlie and Gordy started Crab Trap. That was their first restaurant. And Gordy and Charlie were partners for a long time. And then Charlie opened up Crab Daddy's. And so they share a parking lot, but it's two different entities. And so Josh and my son were all best friends through school. He was 2 years older, and he took Mac to school at Glen Academy. They both were on the golf team together. Well, as soon as Mac got his driver's license, he was taking Josh. Josh never drove again. He took Josh. Well, he's the owner of Crab Daddy's now, and he owns Fiddler's. It's right across. And then Gordy's son, his Ramsey and Blake, his other brother. Okay, Ramsey has Crab Trap. Blake has across the street, the restaurant.
The brewery, Berry Island Brewery.
Berry Island. And he owns the other one right behind Barbara Jean's. Half Shell.
Yeah.
Half Shell. Those are Blake's. And then Ramsey has Crab Trap. And his wife, Daly, she is such a big part of that. She is always there. And she waitresses. And she does everything there. And Ramsey, he works there too. He just kind of oversees everything, but she is always there making sure everything's just right. And Amy, Charlie Williams' daughter, Josh's sister, she makes all the desserts at Fiddler's. She does the key lime pies and everything. So it's a family business too.
Those are amazing key lime pies.
They are amazing.
Yeah, I actually, for one Valentine's Day, I made for Amy, she asked me to make 5 plain cheesecakes. And they had a Valentine's Day special dessert with my cheesecakes. 6 months later, I get a weird message on Facebook. And like, are you the Frank Buddha that made the cheesecakes for Fiddlers? And I'm like, So we kind of did it a little bit under the table. And I'm like, who's asking? So this guy took 6 months to find me because he had one of my slice of cheesecakes at Fiddler's that he wanted to get his own cheesecake. But she's great. And we go to Fiddler's a lot ourselves, for just about any kind of special occasion now. But Miss Jackie, did you have a favorite place to eat growing up?
I don't. I always liked Shoney's.
Shoney's.
Yeah, I always liked Shoney's. Of course, when I was growing up, until I got in high school, people didn't eat out like they do now.
Right.
People ate at home. There were not that many restaurants, and there were no what you might want to call better restaurants. The Forks was better. There was also a place called Morgan's
Cleaners?
out on Blythe Island Highway that had good food. I can remember years ago there was a radio station right at the causeway. There's Parker's and then a street and Walgreens, and there was a restaurant there that is called
The Deck.
The Deck, and they had good food. The Deck had really good food. It's where that radio station is now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But Susan, do you remember? It might have been gone. You're so young, but they used to have square dances on St. Simon's on Saturday night. I can't remember. That place has just now come to my mind.
Benny's Red Barn?
No, it was
when they
down
actually
there
talked.
about where Benny's Red Barn is, and it was a big place, and people would come and square dance on Saturday night.
Okay, I think I know is it where the that cut through where Mike's Equipment is and the Dutchman and CPAC has an office there now. And
It might have been
right
there.
behind there. It was a huge building and they tore it down because we played basketball in there.
Yeah,
And I was in the 7th grade.
but they would never have a regular big building, I don't think, now in St. Simon's
No.
for square dancing now.
That's probably where it was. Benny's Red
It
Barn.
used to be real popular. Yeah.
Okay, Benny's. We lived on Major Wright Road, and we went there every Friday night for dinner. And then when we moved back and my kids, were young, we ate with my parents every Friday night at Benny's Red Barn. And Alvin was working there. He'd been there for years, but Benny's brother ended up helping King and Prince. And so when we got married in 1972, Franklin did our reception at King and Prince. King and Prince. But Benny's Red Barn, it was the place to go. And now it's gotten really good again, and we started going back again. It's really good, and I think the Benny's granddaughter's husband, I think, is the one that has it, and it's gotten good.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, we like going there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the look back in time and the stories. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on here.
Stu, I know you want to do a shout out to Heritage Oaks. Do you want to say anything more about Heritage Oaks?
Oh, if you happen to be looking for an assisted living home, try Heritage Oaks. I've lived in assisted living homes since 2013, and this is the 3rd one, and I like it. I don't ever plan to move again until it's my final move. I I hope I don't. But Heritage Oaks is good. Everybody's friendly. The help is right there to help you with whatever you need. Try it. As the little boy used to say on TV, try it, you'll like it. Try us, you'll like us.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Great window of history into this area. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.